Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another music class. Steven is my name, music teacher, multi-instrumentalist, things like that. Just bought an accordion, by the way. So in the next couple months, you might see me doing some accordion gigs, something like that, just saying. But that's not today's class. Today's class is on rhythm. We did a lesson a couple days ago on Rhythm 101. And today could be considered your second class on rhythm. So the concepts that we're going to get into today are the idea of rhythmic subdivision, counting out loud, especially for hard rhythms, and the idea of beat placement. So here goes. If you look at this little chart here on the left, we have a little bit of a review from our last rhythm lesson. We have the symbols for the rhythms here on the left, and we have their value or their duration here on the right-hand column. Whole notes worth 4, half notes worth 2, quarter notes worth 1, eighth notes worth a half a beat, and 16th notes worth a quarter of a beat. And if you notice, I don't have the names for all of them written here. I have the names for the quarter note, eighth note, and 16th note written out because that's going to come up in counting out loud in a couple minutes. So the first concept we're gonna cover today is called subdivision, rhythmic subdivision. So what it basically means is you have this quarter note that is a beat. And when you subdivide it or cut it in two, it's called a subdivision, okay? You subdivide the quarter note once and it becomes an eighth note. You know, cut it in half. Then you cut the eighth note, one more time and it becomes a 16th note, which is worth a quarter of a beat. Now, I didn't invent the musical system to talk about this stuff, so I'm not sure why a half note is not called a subdivision. I mean, in a way, it is a subdivision. It's a subdivision of a whole note. But for some reason, since the quarter note is the beat in most music, usually these two rhythms, the eighth note and the 16th note, are considered subdivisions. So that's just, it's basic math. It's just the idea of subdividing a beat in halves, okay? And it works all the way, and you could have a 32nd note, 64th note, 128, 256. You could keep on subdividing and subdividing, although in the real world of music, you're probably not going to be playing something too much faster than a 16th note, and you almost never will be playing a note faster than a 32nd note. Now, one thing I kind of didn't prep for this class that I do want to talk about is it's a question that I kind of present to my students sometimes when I teach them 16th notes or eighth notes, is that they're faster, but are they actually fast? That's my question. Is a 16th note fast? Is an eighth note fast? Now, they're faster in that they're twice as fast as the level above it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are extremely fast. You can play very slow 16th notes and have them still be 16th notes because it is all relative. Whatever 4 beats is here, it's going to double in speed, but a very slow rhythm can be doubled in speed. And we're going to do a future class on my 4 or 5 big practice habits of trying to get good at tough stuff. And one of the big ones is going slow, going painfully slow as you need to go in order to get good at a hard rhythm. So that's subdivision and a little bit about speed there. So the next thing we're going to cover is the reason that I have 3 different names written over here and not the other ones, is there's a way of counting quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes out loud that it's going to help you stay on track as far as your music. Now, when you're dealing with instruments that you're using your mouth with, singing, any type of horn, stuff like that, it's impossible to count out loud while performing. Okay, the main instruments that I teach are drums, guitar, bass, ukulele, piano, music production, and a few other things. And in those situations, you're not using your mouth other than when you're singing. You're playing an instrument so you can count out loud with your voice while you go. But if you're playing some sort of horn or vocals while you're practicing that, you're going to have to count these in your head or tap your foot really loud or something like that. We'll probably do a standalone video on those concepts in a little bit. But I do recommend counting out loud all the time. Look, probably for your first couple years. I mean, until you get so in the habit of it that you don't need to anymore. And sometimes that can take 6 months, but that's pretty rare. Usually it takes 1 to 3 years to count out loud so much that you're feeling the subdivisions in your mind, with your body, to the same level of quality that you will while counting out loud. So let's get into it. If you look at these 3 different things over here, I have quarter notes equals this, eighth notes equals this, and 16th notes equals this. I ran out of room, so that should be like an equal sign. We'll get to that last. But these are 3 different ways of counting, but they kind of aren't 3 different ways. We're kind of just adding a new step with each subsequent level. So when you're counting quarter notes out loud, everyone has done this before in some context. It's counting to 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. When you see these notes going by themselves, this quarter note, that is the type of counting that you should be doing. And one thing I probably should have done for today's class is included the equivalent rests. I mean, this lesson isn't even on rests, but rests are always there in music, and they're equally as important as notes. And maybe for a future class, we'll do one on notes and rests and general rhythm reading. But just know there's a quarter note, and a quarter rest would be the same thing, except you don't play any music on the actual beat. So if I'm counting out loud and playing music by clapping, here'd be quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And if I'm resting, say I'm resting on the 2, I would go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So the next counting scheme is eighth notes. Now, the reason that it's not really a different counting scheme or a new thing is that the numbers are still there. All there is these plus signs, but they're actually called ands in music. Ands are in between the numbers. So what's interesting about this, which can take a second to kind of navigate when you're learning or when you're teaching, is that the quarter notes are quarter notes, okay? And the ands are eighth notes, but also the numbers are also eighth notes. Okay, I know that might seem a little confusing if it's your first time, but these are all your eighth notes. These are all your quarter notes. The only thing that we're kind of talking about here that isn't a quarter note is the and. My point is, as you go to your quicker levels, the rhythms that are at the levels above it stay in there and you keep counting them. So if I were to ask you to count all your quarter notes, you would say 1, 2, 3, 4 over and over. But if I were to say count all your eighth notes, you wouldn't just say and. You would include the previous level in them. That's my point. As always, let me know below in the comment section if I'm messing something up or if I'm not breaking it down enough or it's confusing or something like that. Open to feedback, just let me know. So let's count some eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And just back to a previous point for a second. I went that speed, which was about double the tempo of my quarter notes, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't. All it has to be is double the speed of whatever you set your quarter note at. If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So it just, again, this is why we covered subdivision earlier, because I'm subdividing my whatever beat by 2 when I'm adding my next level of counting. Okay, 1 and so now a quick thing just to get to a little bit of beat placement, and then we'll finish off with the 16th notes, then we'll be done. The idea of beat placement is, well, we have our duration of notes over here, okay? We have our duration of notes. A whole note lasts for 4 beats, but what beat does it start on? In our first rhythm lesson, we compared this to time a little bit. Hey, I'm talking to you here on March 31st. Now, what part of March 31st? I mean, right now it's 6:43 p.m. and the day is going to be over in 5 hours and 17 minutes. But we also have the idea of when does the day actually start? Okay, I did this thing on that day. I did this thing at the start of the day. I did this thing as soon as the day started. So on one hand, there is a day, but there is a very start of the day, and that would be at midnight, okay? So midnight, 12:01, there's a debate over that. So what I'm saying about beat placement is, say you have a quarter note that falls on beat 2. It starts the same time beat 2 starts. That is called on the 2. Now it still lasts for a full beat, okay? But the idea of beat placement is the time at which a note or a rest falls on, or the time that it actually happens. There's a moment that has not happened, and there's a moment that it has happened. So I'm like, I'm going to clap on the 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's beat placement. I can tell a person, hey, clap on the 2 and the 4. Rest on the 2 and the 4. Clap only on the 3. That idea of on. That's what beat placement is. When does the thing we're speaking about actually happen? So that's beat placement. We're going to touch on that again in a second, but here's one more thing. It says here that this and that comes after the 2, in that it's inside of the second beat, is called the and of 2. If you're, I can't hear you speaking right now, but if you say that, try to say that out loud. The and of 2. That's the name of that beat. So I'm like, hey, clap on the and of 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So my point is that in eighth notes, there's 8 different beats that could be played on or rested on. And you have to be competent at basically all combinations of them. And there's not that many combinations. You just have to be comfortable with doing what you want to do on each one of those beats. Now let's cover 16th notes. Just like the previous 2 levels, you're adding things. The previous rhythm does exist, but you're adding something with each subsequent level. In this scheme of the 16th note, you are adding, and this can kind of throw people for a loop or just kind of sound a little silly, is you're adding what's called an E and an on either side of the and, okay? So before, you're like 1 and 2 and. Now you're going 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 16th notes. There's 16 different things that can be counted there. Now, just to go back to beat placement for a second, the E of 2. It sounds weird. It sounds weird. I know people aren't used to like defining it in this way and making it so clear, but that is the name of a valid beat to do something on inside of 16th note rhythms. The E of 2, the and of 1, the of 4. Okay, and just remember the thing is the E of a number means it falls inside of the number. So the E, another way of saying it could be the E after 1. I don't know why it's the E of. Again, I didn't invent this system. I just learned how to do it, and it's a tradition that goes back, I don't know, at least 100 years, probably longer or something like that. So I'm trying to think of anything else that we should cover today. There's always more to cover. My point is, when you're reading music or performing music, these 3 counting systems are going to come up all the time. And you have to be good, and you should be good at whatever rhythm you do, counting it out loud. And another thing, don't whisper it either. The number of students that I have encountered that thought they would be fine just like whispering it or just thinking it, you're going to be fine enough, I would say. Fine enough to get better, but do you want to get better, or do you want to get better at maximum efficiency? What I would practice doing, I've done this specifically with a couple of my students in the last 3 months, where I found them that they were saying their ands, their e's, or their uhs way quieter than the other ones. And that's very common. They'll go 1 and 2 and 3. I'm like, no. And it would actually cause them to play the ands or play some of the rhythms not as accurate and not feel them enough. What you want to do is feel all of them. And once you're very, very good at feeling all of them, you can choose which ones to do quieter or which ones to do louder. But what you're trying to do, if you hear me count 1, E, and 2, they're all valid. Every single one of them is valid. And the better you get at music, the more you're going to have to play things on the E of 4, or you're going to have to rest for 3 whole beats and then play only on the and of 4. So it's very important to count out loud. And maybe in the next video that we'll do, we'll get into what my big practice tips are. And counting out loud is definitely one of them. So that's the lesson today. We covered subdivisions, the idea of subdividing a beat into cutting in half, and that's called a subdivision. We have my voice is cracking a lot today. Forgive me. Maybe I'm trying to hit a high C or something like that. Quarter note, eighth note, and 16th note are three different counting schemes. Quarter notes is 1, 2, 3, 4. Eighth note, you still count the numbers, but you add an and in between everyone. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And finally, you have our 16th notes, which is 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and there's 16 of them in a measure. That's why they're called 16th notes. And finally, we covered beat placement, which is the idea of when exactly something starts in music. I clapped on the 1. He blew his trumpet on the and of 4, okay? He rested on the E of 2 right there. Okay, so that's our lesson for today. Share this out, hit the like button. There's things I'm required to say as a person that's on YouTube, and maybe leave a comment section. Tell me what you want me to cover in my next video. I can make a little list of what people are commenting and sending me direct messages and things like that. But love you guys. Have a great day. It's a music lesson. We'll be back again with another one tomorrow. 30 videos in 30 days.